thank you all so much for joining today's event, which is all about periods and disability when you live with an impairment or a condition. Now, I'm Shani Danda, I am today's host, and I just wanted to start by a little bit of housekeeping. So, if you require live captions or would like to have the subtitles on, at the bottom of your screen, you will see a live transcript button. If you click that and then click on show subtitle, you should then see the live captions on your screen. If you need any help or that's not working for you for whatever reason, just let us know in the chat and we will try and help you. Also, as you know, this event is being recorded today because it will be shared after the event. And we have an amazing panel with us. So this is your opportunity to ask those questions that you might have always wanted to, but never really known how to ask them or who to ask them. So do put any questions that you've got in the Q&A. And if we don't get to it in the discussion, then we will come to it at the end. I also want to say a massive shout out to our sponsors today, NatraCare, and we are joined by Shana as well. Shana will also be in hand to answer any questions that you might have about NatraCare products. But before we get into today, I just want to hand over to Jazz from City to Sea to tell you a little bit more about today's event. And yeah, over to you, Jazz.
Hi everybody, thanks Shani. Great to have you all here. As Shani said, my name's Jazz and I work for City to Sea, which is the organisation that's brought you this event. We are an environmental not-for-profit and our core goal is to prevent plastic pollution from source. So I manage our plastic-free periods campaign, and I'm also a teacher trainer for our schools programme, which is called Rethink Periods. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background to the campaign and why we decided to run this event, and then I'll pass back and we can get on to all the good stuff. So Plastic-Free Periods is a campaign that's been running for about 4 years now, and we've got 4 kind of key goals. The first one is to raise awareness of the fact that there is lots of plastic and chemicals in our period products, and many people don't realise that. The second is to stop people flushing period products down the toilet, because flushing is the way that period products end up becoming litter on our beaches, and they're actually the 5th most common item of plastic pollution on European beaches now. So plastic products are a serious environmental problem. The third is to provide education and information and guides on eco-friendly and health-friendly period products. And then the 4th goal is to help make those products accessible to as many people as possible through working with schools, the NHS, retailers, lobbying the government, and doing lots of kind of online and engagement activity. So just to give you a little bit of background to why we put this event on. Last year we ran a survey on periods and disability, and lots of you guys filled that in, so thank you so much for doing that. That survey found that more than 2 in 5 of the people who filled it in were not happy with the period care products that they were using. And of the people that aren't happy, 88% were using big brand tampons that contain plastic, and 42% were using big brand pads that again contain lots of plastic and fragrances. So we really don't think that's good enough. We think everybody deserves to feel confident, to feel dignified, and to be as comfortable as possible whilst they're on their period, our period, your period. There was also a really clear call for more information about periods and period products through the lens of conditions and impairments, as well as more personal stories and recommendations. So we've teamed up with NatraCare, our sponsors, who are the pioneers of the world's first organic and natural tampons, pads and liners, to curate this event with all these amazing panelists and hosts. And just so you know, we've also just today released a new period product guide, which is specifically looking at how different products might suit people with different needs. So after this event, I'm going to be emailing you a link to the guide, not straight after the event, but probably in a week or so, I'll email you a recording to this event in case you miss anything or you want to share it. And we'll also be sending a survey, which would be really helpful for us to kind of get a feel for what was useful for you, what wasn't so useful, if anything else might be helpful for you. And if you fill in that survey, you can win a great bundle of Naturacare products. So there's a nice incentive there. So I'm going to hand you back to Shani now, but myself and Shana, who's from Naturacare, will be back for the Q&A later if you want to ask us any questions. Enjoy. Thank you, Shani.
Thank you, Jazz. And you know, when I was invited to host this event, I was really shocked with everything that you had told me, you know, about the survey results, just actually the amount of plastic pollution that period products also add to the environment as well. And personally, like I thought I was not too bad. You know, I make my own washing up liquid, I make my own laundry detergent. I thought I had this plastic thing, like I thought I was making a good contribution, but I hadn't even considered the period products that I use. So this event personally is massively eye-opening for me. And, you know, my lived experiences is I was born with a condition myself. So everything that I've learned personally about periods has always been through the view of a non-disabled person. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. But without further ado, let's introduce the panelists. We have some amazing people with us today. I will hand over to them now. So Robin, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Robin. Thank you very much for having me on the panel. I wrote a book called The Autism Friendly Guide to Periods. I have autism myself, and I also have several other disabilities, including cerebral palsy. So I have a lot of kind of access difficulties, and like you were saying, I didn't really realise until I started doing the research for my book, one, what an issue it was in terms of sensory issues for autistic people using period products, but two, that it was very easy to switch to something that was far more environmentally friendly and very available. Obviously, I think that the elephant in the room might be that if you're on a lower income, as many disabled people are, some of these products can be difficult in terms of finances if you are struggling with cash flow. And I just wanted to say that, you know, if anyone out there, you know, when you're in a supermarket, you know, if you have the spare money, you can, you know, buy a menstrual cup and put it into the food bank, and it would be gratefully received. There's a lot of people that really need it. And yeah, so just, you know, I think it's just important to just acknowledge our, you know, for those of us that are able to access these products, that it is a financial privilege, as well as a knowledge privilege as we're learning. So yeah, so I guess I'm twofold in that I know about autism, I know a bit about periods, and I have cerebral palsy.
Thank you, Robin, and what an amazing shout out as well. You're absolutely right. You know, disabled people do face many unavoidable extra costs. So I really love the idea of buying that and donating it if you can as well in your local supermarket. Imogen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, I'm Imogen. I run an Instagram account called The Feeding of the Fox, where I write about body neutrality, radical body politics, body liberation, and disability rights comes into that. My lived experiences as a disabled person. I've had my impairment since birth, and I found managing my periods, certainly while I was a full-time wheelchair user, incredibly difficult. As somebody who had 24-hour care with personal assistance, and yeah, that's been like an ongoing issue for me. So I've gone through years of not having periods, and at the moment, every 2 weeks. Hello, very welcome to see you again. Thanks so much. So yeah, no, I just, as a disabled person, I think it's just weird. There's not a lot of conversation about how we're helping manage our periods, and yeah, the plastic stuff, I guess, felt kind of secondary to me because it wasn't something that I was actually that aware of. Been quite ignorant to, but I mostly wanted to find something that really worked for me as a disabled person. I think I've probably just about nailed it now, but yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Imogen. And I'm totally with you on that one. You've got so many other things that take your focus, away. The plastic thing for me was also just something secondary. Because I also have PCOS, so I'm just trying to manage that first and foremost. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Sophie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It's yeah, a real pleasure to be here. Yeah, so my background is I'm a podcast host. I have a podcast called A Life Less Ordinary, which I started last year. And alongside that, I'm also a water ski athlete. I compete for Great Britain. I acquired my disability. I got a spinal cord injury 10 years ago. So I have a kind of dual experience, obviously being able-bodied previously. And my experience with kind of periods and plastic and things like that, when I was younger, it wasn't, I don't know if this is the same for you guys, but it just wasn't really part of the conversation about the plastic and the impact that the products that we were using, or I was taught to use, just never occurred to me to use a cup or anything like that. It just wasn't part of the conversation. And I think in terms of disability as well, I completely agree with you, Shani. There's so much other stuff to manage, and medical wise, with various things. Convenience is everything for us and for able-bodied people as well. But yeah, absolutely, it kind of takes a bit of a backseat sometimes, which really shouldn't happen. So it was actually Jazz that kind of introduced me to using sustainable products, and so excited to be here because since I've sort of started having conversations with her and doing a bit with City2C, I literally would never look back, and I'm so kind of passionate about it. So yeah, that's me really.
Thank you for sharing that. And Kyla, our last panelist, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm really excited to be here as well. My father spent my childhood kind of cleaning up other people's trash on the beaches on our holiday walks. And so being plastic free and being the hippie child that I was, this is always kind of felt quite important. I also got my period at a very young age. But my background is as a filmmaker and activist, and I explore the perspective of the other. I'm the creator of The Other Screen, which are film events that are dedicated to the perception of the deaf and disabled community. I also co-directed and co-wrote a film called It's Personal, which just recently came out. And I'm currently co-writing a television series in development for Channel 4.
Wow, that's massively exciting. Can't wait to hear more about that. So this our amazing panel. Let's get into the discussion. And the first question that I wanted to ask everybody today is, what was your experience of period education? And, what were you taught when you were younger? I know we're all different ages on this panel, and some of you have already touched upon that. But Sophie, if we could perhaps go to you first. What was your educational experience like?
Well, like I said before, there wasn't kind of much in terms of choice. It was basically pads or tampons, and that was kind of it. It was never a question of kind of what else was out there and actually the impact that had. It's kind of crazy, when I was growing up, it was obviously, well, in my situation, it was my mum that was kind of introducing me to those sort of things. And she's always been really, really kind of environmentally minded. We were in terry toweling instead of nappies and stuff like that. And, kind of now I have taken on so much from what I was kind of raised to believe. But there was a huge barrier with period products. It just wasn't part of the conversation. So yeah, that was it really, until a couple of years ago. Almost ashamed to admit that I was so late to the game, and now use a cup and absolutely wouldn't go back. It's just makes so much sense for so many reasons, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I think most of us, probably, our education comes when we go off and do our own research, or when events like this, make us aware to things that we probably weren't. Personally, I went to a special needs primary school, was taught about periods, I think a week before we were going to leave school. It was all very clinical. We I want to almost say the expectation was probably that none of us were going to ever have sex. Therefore, the education that we had, it wasn't about, it was just all about periods and what products to use, and the boys were separated from the girls. It just all felt very clinical. But I would love to hear everybody else's experiences. Imogen, would you like to share your experience of period education?
I'm sort of avidly nodding along there, because I went to it was an inclusive secondary school, so there was like a special needs department, and it's really interesting, isn't it? I wonder how different it would be, the experience of education we would have had as non-disabled children to disabled children, perhaps. And I don't, obviously some of the panel acquired their impairments, so they might have had a really different experience, but similar to you, that there wasn't a lot of conversation for us around periods. And I certainly at primary school, and I went to mainstream primary, I remember a woman pointing me out and saying, fat people start their periods early. So that my introduction to fat phobia started young. There was an idea that I was going to have my period soon because I was a fat kid. But again, separated from the boys, and I remember feeling just like a lot of shame. The whole thing felt shameful, like we were taken out of the classroom and taken into like this little library space, and the boys were left and like allowed to do something else. It just felt, it was really uncomfortable, and I hated that I was singled out as a fat person. That just felt awful. And then as I got older, I think that shameful kind of thing just continued. It was like it was gifted to me. Here's some information about your periods, and here's a ton of shame to go with it. And that just carried on really through, like, probably until very, very recently, I would say, like probably the last 5 years, because I just didn't know how to have conversations. My mum didn't really want to talk about it. There wasn't a lot of conversation in the media about it. I didn't know how to ask what products to try. It all came eventually through word of mouth, what my friends were doing, what other people were talking about. So I think my period education really has only kind of taken off in the last sort of 5-10 years, I would say.
Yeah. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And, I totally feel you when you said, oh, you get taught about it and then here's all the shame that goes along with it. And, panelists, tell me if you agree, but when you first find out about periods, didn't you just feel like, oh my God, the world was hiding like the biggest secret ever? Why weren't we told about this when we were a bit younger? And like, you've been given all this information. It's like, this is what I've got to look forward to now. And Imogen, like, the boys were left playing, doing something fun, but boys equally need to be part of this conversation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
I remember when I had a friend to stay over who also had an impairment, and she'd come on her period and couldn't change her own sanitary towel. And I hadn't started my periods yet. So that was my very first glimpse of what periods were actually going to look like. And I remember just being like how on earth, like what are we meant to do with this? This feels wild.
Yeah, wow, that's certainly an introduction. Thank you for sharing that. Kyla, can we come to you next? What was your experience of period education?
You know, Shani, I don't really remember learning about my period or what to expect. It wasn't kind of one moment, just more of a collection of events. I was about 10 when I got my period, so I was very young. And I remember using pads, and I would, before I went to school, because I was non-disabled until the age of 15, and then I acquired my disability through a spinal cord injury. And I would take the pads and kind of pre-open the wrapping around the sides, so that when I was in the toilet stall, you wouldn't hear the sound of the pad opening and ripping. And then I remember when I was, I don't know, maybe 14 or so, and there were the cool girls in the loo, and they'd snuck in some of the cool guys into the loo. And I remember someone saying, "Oh my gosh, someone used a pad in here. It's so gross. Like, I just used, who would use a pad? It's disgusting. Like, I use tampons." And I remember feeling, that's when I started feeling shame around my period, was because of my choice of sanitary wear, a menstrual product. So yeah, and I remember in sex education, there was this kind of plastic uterus that was clear plastic, and the sex education teacher, who happened to be the mother of one of my boyfriends at the time, she tried to show us how to use an internal female condom, or an internal vaginal condom. And she put it inside this plastic uterus and then couldn't get it out, and had to end up taking apart this kind of plastic uterus. And I remember thinking, that's right, I'm never putting anything inside me again.
Oh my gosh, if that's not enough to scar you for life. Oh my gosh, wow. I can see Imogen hands on her face as well. Wow. But that's, resonated with a lot there, especially, being shamed for your choice of period product as well. I actually remember, just a couple of years ago, actually, just joking with a friend, when women go to the toilet and you hear that sound, the pad coming off the plastic, like, you just know, don't you? Like, it's that time of the month. But thank you so much for sharing. And Robin, we'd love to hear your experience of period education.
Yeah, I think having autism, and both my parents are autistic, and that didn't come from me, by the way. They decided that they self-identified as autistic, and I didn't suggest that. Just they read a lot about it and saw it in me and realised, oh, actually, we're autistic too. My mum was a biology teacher in a secondary school, and from a young age, like when I was like a toddler, I used to go in the loo with my mum. I don't really know why I did that, but she taught me about periods that way, and she used pads, and so I saw what periods looked like. And then when I was 14, my period started, and I think I sort of got over it within about, I don't know, a couple of minutes. Like, I was like, oh, okay, because I was already prepared. And also because my mum has like heavy, painful periods. It turns out that my mum actually has 2 wombs, and so I don't have 2 wombs, but she has 2 wombs, and so she has very heavy periods and very painful. And she didn't know that until much later on. And so she told me that sometimes periods can be painful, and if that is a problem in my life, that we can go to my GP and they can give me some medication for it. And that's what happened. So I think I had to wait 6 months for my periods to settle, and they were still painful, so I got medication, so it was only really 6 months of my life where it was, I mean, they were still not great. But I also later, as an adult, when I started writing the period book, I realized that I suffer from PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is like an acute bout of depression just before your period. And what marks it out from normal depression is that it stops once your period has started. like not necessarily on the day, but you know, a couple of days into your period. So taking a progesterone only pill, I found that treated that and also reduced the heaviness of my periods. But yeah, for me, I think that I had it easy compared to everybody else. I'd echo the shame thing. I never really felt shame, but I know that so many people who have periods do. And also, you know, just to flag up that people across the gender spectrum have periods. So sometimes, you know, somebody, they might not identify as a woman or a girl, but they have periods. And so a lot of period education is very, you know, they use words like girl and woman, but actually periods aren't necessarily gender specific. And also there's plenty of girls and women who don't have periods because, say, they've gone through the menopause, or maybe they're having chemotherapy, or they've had to have their womb removed. So there's lots of reasons why. So I think it's just really important to just be aware of that.
Yeah, thank you. Those are really important points to raise there. Thank you. And I think it's really fascinating when you talked about, oh, I was made aware of periods from a really young age. And are you glad? I know this might sound weird, but are you happy that that was your experience, rather than you just sort of going into school one day and being sat down and being taught about it in that way?
Yeah, because the sex education was like that, and it was
Yeah.
mortifyingly embarrassing. Like, it reflects what other panelists have said about their education in school in terms of the emotions. Girls and boys were separated, and it was so embarrassing. And whereas with periods, because I knew about it, I was just like, well, I know about this. This isn't anything to worry about. I think the only thing I would have added to it, and this wouldn't have been possible because of my mum's different anatomy, and in fact she didn't know that, but that if I had a daughter, I think kind of once she sort of got to the age where she was going to start having periods, I think I'd have a conversation with her about that it's okay to put your finger in your vagina, because if you want to use a tampon or a menstrual cup, then it is quite important to be comfortable with that. And because I did try to use tampons previously, like when I was a kid, and I struggled with it. And my mum, because of her anatomy, she can't use tampons, so she couldn't really help me. And also, she sort of told me about toxic shock syndrome, which scared me. But actually, I think that sort of getting to know your body, and like not feeling that, if you're in the bathroom by yourself, your vagina is yours. You can do what you want with it. And there's nothing wrong with understanding the anatomy of your body. And I think that that's a really important thing for all people of all genders to know, that your body is yours, you own it, and it's important to get to know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you're just left, aren't you, with products and you don't know what to do with them, and you don't have people to teach you how to use them or how to sometimes insert them. So that's a really good call out there. Thank you, Robin. I guess you've moved us on nicely to the next question, which is about your experience of having periods and how that might have changed over time. So Kyla, can we start with you for this question? Are you happy to share some experiences that you've had of having periods?
Very happy to share. Yeah, so I require 24-hour care, and I require assistance with everything from kind of helping me create my films to showering, to getting dressed, to changing my tampon. And I do use tampons, Natural Care ones, in fact. And I have, I think that I manage, well, I don't want to say manage. That's another word that I don't want to say around period, because it's not about managing it. It's like, it's kind of experiencing it, or I experience my period with another person all the time. And that's quite unusual. And I definitely wasn't prepared for that when I had my accident, but there are things that just became kind of facts. But the interesting thing about sharing my period is that we all have different ideas of what our own normal is. And so I was also getting ideas from my PAs of what, opinions about my period. and in some instances that actually helped. So one of my PAs just said that I bleed really heavily, very, very heavily, and have a lot of clotting. And my mother did as well. She's gone through the menopause now. And I always thought it was just normalized to me because that's what my mother experienced and that's what she shared. But then finally it just kind of became a bit too much 2 or 3 years ago. And I went to the GP and had an ultrasound and found out that I had fibroids. And I'd never heard of fibroids before. I was in my 30s and I was kind of just hearing about this. I had no idea that they could impact your period and your, the flow and the amount and consistency. And so I was really shocked and went through a bit of, I was like, so I have benign tumors inside me, or is there a way that they're not going to become benign? So because of that, I then decided to get the coil, a progesterone coil, and that significantly lessened the flow of my period and really assisted so that I can use far less period products, and it's become much more manageable with another person as well. The other thing that I experienced with my period, like before my accident, I used pads, and then after my accident, I used tampons. And I would have really preferred to use menstrual cups, but because of the intimacy it requires and assistance it requires, I don't quite feel comfortable enough with a personal assistant assisting me in that way. And also just position wise, in terms of how I position myself in my chair to get the angle of the cervix would probably, I suspect, would be quite messy.
Yeah, wow. And just a follow-up question. So I thought it was really fascinating how you described that you experience your period with other people. I have many friends who are, wheelchair users, some require full-time assistance as well. And when we've spoken about it, I've never really heard any of them talk about it in that way. So really interesting for me to understand it like that. But at what point, sort of, having a period is a very intimate experience, isn't it? It's one that I guess many of us may not share with other people. So how did you just get on with doing that? Like, was it the PAs that just sort of said, you know what, we've supported other people, we know what we're doing, we've had them too? Like, can you just tell us a little bit more about that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the majority of my personal assistants over the last 20 years have been women or gender minority people. So I feel like a lot of the female workforce in care, or the workforce in care, are women, and I think it's about 3/4 of the workforce of care are women and people that are in a gender minority. And I think that I feel comfortable with that demographic, very much so. Yeah, so I suppose nobody ever kind of took me through anything or made me feel more comfortable or ensured that I was the one comfortable. I find that a lot of the emotional labor that I do is making other people feel comfortable. And I think that we do that as disabled people all the time.
Yeah, nodding away at that. Absolutely, I can really relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I never found that I was talked through anything. I think that I've just done so much anti-ableism work and unlearning myself of ableism, and because of that, it's made me just see things without shame, without without apologizing. We shouldn't have to apologize for our bodies. We shouldn't have to feel shame around our natural functions. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Robin, can we come to you next, and can you tell us a little bit about your experience of having periods? I know you touched on it earlier, but if there's anything else that you'd like to share with us too.
Yeah, I mean, for me, obviously, I had PMDD and I didn't realize what it was. I knew about PMS, but I didn't know about PMDD. But that seems to be under control now, and that in general now I've got stable mental health. But I mean, this is slightly aside from periods, but I think it kind of entwines with it. But I didn't have stable mental health until I got the right combination of medication, which includes the progesterone-only pill. So I think that's, if there are any people out there that are experiencing unstable mental health, or that they're struggling with depression or anxiety, to know that it is worth persevering with different combinations of medication, because obviously do it with your doctor, like not on your own. But you can get there, and I've been very lucky. Since 2018 I've had those stable mental health, which has been really incredible. I really just wanted to sort of reference what other people have said about, like knowing how to use products, and that when I wrote my book, like that was one of the things I wanted to do, was have like photos step by step, because for me it was easy because I'd watched my mum do it, but that isn't everyone's experience. And also with the 3D model, like, because again, teachers are teaching it, or people who feel uncomfortable, then they can if you're feeling a bit awkward, it's going to be harder for you to teach it. So there are some 3D models, and it explains. I never understood the tampon. That was one thing about tampons. I never understood the packet, like the pictures. I found them confusing. So like there's a full-on 3D image of what the womb and the fallopian tubes and the ovaries and the vagina, and then it turned on its side, and then it cut in half. So that you get the cross section, so it explains it, and then there's step-by-step photos of how to use all the internal things like tampons and menstrual cups. I think I wish that I'd had that information, but also, I think that the noise thing, I can't remember who it was that said that they sort of half opened the packet before they got into school. I wish I'd thought of that. But I think, I've had it easy compared to a lot of people. I mean, certainly, obviously, I have cerebral palsy, but it's down one side, and so I think that makes it a lot easier, because I can always use my left hand, which is my affected hand, like to hold things still. It can just sit there. So I feel like I've had a pretty easy experience.
Thank you for sharing that, and I totally agree with you. I think we all wish that we had more resources on this growing up, and it's such a shame that we're only learning the stuff that we really need to know now as adults. Imagine if we had this information and education and resource from when we started to have our periods. But let's go to Imogen next, please.
Yeah, my experience of periods just feels like wild. Because I also had 24-hour care for a really long time. I was a full-time power chair user. I was hoisted for my transfers, and I can't imagine how you use tampons, Cola, because I just they were so painful. Because once you're hoisted into your wheelchair, I couldn't move. So if it was when they poke you and it's a little bit uncomfortable, I just found that absolutely unbearable. It made me spasm. I hated it. It was so painful. I found managing the pain of periods really difficult, because I was already in quite a lot of pain. That felt overwhelming. I also really struggled with a lot of bladder pain in my 20s, and a lot of pelvic pain, and I found that the heightening of that pain when I was on my period, that was really, really challenging. I found managing PAs quite difficult. I actually had quite a lot of male identifying PAs. I mean, I say a lot, I had a handful of them. I went through periods where I had agency staff, so I wasn't choosing my own personal assistant. So I had I was reliant on other people who just showed up, and that was really, really challenging. Trying to explain to somebody who I had never met before and probably was never going to see again, I found that really, really difficult. I also spent a significant amount of time in hospital, and that also was really difficult. So I actually had like periods in intensive care, found that really quite challenging. And I got to the point where I didn't really use period products really at all. So I would do things like using continence pads because they were just enormous, and I didn't have to worry about like if like when someone's dressing you and you're trying to get a sanitary towel, but your knickers need to be in the right place, otherwise the sanitary towel isn't in the right place, which was just like mind-boggling, especially to some of the male identifying PAs who had obviously never had to get knickers in the right place before. So I mean, the NHS paid for my incontinence pad, so I was just like, do you know what, I'm just going to put an incontinence pad in, and it was big enough that I didn't really then have to worry about like where the blood was going. And then I had long periods, or like long periods of time without periods, either through malnutrition or just like really being very, very poorly indeed. And then times where I've also had PMDD, where it really impacted my mental health and I really struggled to manage that. I would say now, so I've actually just had a stint where I did maybe 2 or 3 years without periods because I've been quite poorly. But I've just started, I reckon about a year ago, got my periods back. And I would say now, like I'm definitely the later end of my 30s. So I feel like I'm probably reaching a point where my body kind of knows what it's doing. It's definitely less fussy than it was beforehand, but also I've got the privilege now of being able to do my periods much more independently. My pain is much more manageable, but I think also I'm so much more willing to have conversations about it. Like I'm really happy just to like ring my mates and be like, what do you do about this? Like, what is this? Like, I'm the kind of person that will screenshot something, take a picture, send it to my mate, circle it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Neon line. What is this? Arrows. Do you know? Like I will ask all the questions. That I'm just not ashamed anymore at all. Really, I think that's been a very grateful part of like body liberation in general. Really. But yeah, like
age.
Hey.
You think that sort of liberation and, you know, sharing and not really caring about what other people think, do you think that comes with age?
I think that I like to think it comes with age because I think that it's kind of happening to people around me as we've grown. But I mean, maybe actually I'm just part of a very radically political community. And so I think there is an element of, like I was chatting to a friend today and she'd been talking to one of her colleagues about sex, and her colleague was absolutely horrified that she was just having a conversation about sex. I just can't imagine being that prudish anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like now there's a cup, they've invented a menstrual cup that you can use and you can have penetrative sex whilst using the cup, and like that's so cool. Like if you want to have sex while you're on your period, brilliant. But you have to be able to have those conversations in the first place for anybody to find out about them and realize that those kinds of products are available. And it's so much harder when you've got an impairment because there is that kind of awkwardness of like, well, I don't really know how to manage that. And for me, certainly, like more than just being a disabled person, I was a patient in hospital. And so that I found that really difficult too. But yeah, also I use you know, there's like incontinence sheets that you can put in your bed. I use those at night time, and incontinence pads during the day for a lot of it. And now I use the cup, which I absolutely love.
Amazing. Well, we'll be talking a bit more about products in a little while, but thank you so much for sharing. And so, you know, I'm South Asian, and periods are unfortunately a massive taboo to talk about still. in along with many other things that shouldn't be in the South Asian community. And I have a 13-year-old niece, and I openly talk about periods with her, and she's like, "Oh, be quiet, you're embarrassing me." She's actually a twin, so that I've got a niece and a nephew, and I say the same thing to both of them, because I want my niece to feel that she can talk to me about it and ask me anything. But also my nephew needs to know about this too. He's going to be around women. Maybe he might marry a woman. Maybe he might have a daughter one day. It's so important that men are, and all genders are part of this conversation, right? But I just think growing up, it's especially when you have a condition and impairment, the people that you can perhaps talk to and the ones that can give you that best advice, the circle is just quite small. And I'm 34, I'm going to be 34 this year. I didn't grow up with social media, so it was literally whoever was around you that you could try and ask. But Sophie, if we could come to you and hear a little about your experience of having periods and how that might have changed over time.
Sure. So yeah, Imogen, so much of what you were saying, particularly about friends and those conversations, I was kind of nodding like frantically, because I definitely feel like as I've got older, I've started to be able to and be more confident, particularly having, acquired my disability, to kind of start having those conversations and just really open up a bit more about it and about the impact, because periods are so complicated, they're so different for so many people. They have so many side effects, and we're not talking about them nearly enough. And I think it can be really isolating as well, with a person with a disability, as a person with a disability as well. You're kind of going through this, and if you're struggling with it, with pain or managing it, I think it's just it's obviously super helpful. But I feel like I've definitely started to be able to talk about that with friends a bit more, which is really, really nice. So my kind of history, I guess. So after I kind of turned 18, 19, I went on the pill for quite a long time. And after I got my spinal cord injury, which is when I was 22, I wasn't supposed to be on a combined pill. It's not really recommended. So I was kind of looking at kind of other options and things like that. And, kind of side note a little bit was just that I realized what kind of hormones from contraception was doing to me. That's a different story. But I'm definitely kind of a big believer in that now, and not wanting to go down that route necessarily. So kind of having my disability, obviously, well, not obviously, but for me, it changed my experiences of it, and the way it kind of was for me. Tended to be kind of shorter, which is total blessing. But with them, I don't know if you're going to cover contraception. I might be jumping ahead here a bit. But I did, I went on the coil, the copper coil, for a time, which made my periods like insanely heavy. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that. I think it may be quite rare, but that was kind of wild. And, being a wheelchair user as well, it's really difficult to manage, and just, figuring it out, but also feeling kind of a bit alone with that is really, really hard. But also not wanting to necessarily go for the convenience, so that's kind of was my experiences of that. That's kind of, that brings me up to the present, really. But basically, prior to my injury, being able to be on the pill, which was a form of managing it, I guess, for such a long time. But after having my spinal cord injury, kind of realizing I needed to manage it in different ways. But now I think like you, Imogen, as well, I feel, able, perhaps it's age, perhaps it's experience, or just, education, feel much more able to manage it and manage it in a way that I want to as well. Something that kind of, it doesn't have such a bad impact on the environment as well. But talking is good.
I think that's a really great point there that you just raised, managing it how you want to, because there's a massive massive topic of dignity as well that's attached to this conversation, especially when you're managing other health conditions or impairments alongside of it. Sometimes this can just feel like an entire job in itself, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. And there is actually a comment in the chat from Lizzie, who said a copper coil made my periods insanely heavy too. I think that's quite common. Robin, I think you have something to add.
Oh yeah, just had a couple of things that I just wanted to add, that sort of based on what Sophie said, and also a bit on what Imogen said. Just for anyone else that is thinking about the pill, during the research for my book, one thing I learned was that there's like 13 different types of pill. Like I think obviously there's the combined and then there's the progesterone only, but there's like 13 of those. And so if one is not working for you or is having an impact on your mental health, then you can talk to your GP and switch to another one. I'm not saying that sort of addresses the fact that you're putting hormones into your body, because obviously you are still doing that, but just if you are having negative effects from the pill, that is an option. And also I think that sometimes people get the coil and the intrauterus device mixed up, but you can have an IUD that doesn't have copper in it, that just releases hormones. I just thought that would be worth pointing out. And then earlier, I meant to say it earlier, but I forgot. But Imogen was talking about like taking photos or screenshots of stuff and asking friends about it. One of the things I did with my book was that I created some fake periods that look very realistic out of strawberry jam and water, and took photos of them. So there's spotting, and there's heavy periods, light periods, periods mixed with poo, periods mixed with wee, so that people could see what they looked like. And I think people could do that. If they're teaching their young person about that, then you could do that very easily. It's just a bit of strawberry jam and water.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much for sharing that. You are a brilliant expert on this, and I really need to get your book. I don't know about anybody else, but thank you so much for adding that. So just to say, if you have got any questions or any comments, please pop them in the Q&A. We will get to them after this last question that I'm going to ask the panel. So let's talk a little bit about the products that you've all tried, and how they might have worked or might not have worked for you. Now, early this week, I received a package of lots of different products that I can't wait to try. I've never said this before. I can't wait to have my next period, but so many new products to try. But Kyla, shall we come to you first? Do you want to perhaps share or talk a bit about some products that have worked for you?
Yeah, I was really interesting hearing about Imogen and having a very different experience to me. And I think that's good to point out, is that all disabled people are different regardless of whether we look like we have similarities or not. So for me, what has worked is using a tampon. That is what works best for me. I often dislike pads. I used to have to potentially double up with pads and a tampon before I had the coil, when my periods were extremely heavy. And I just felt like I was kind of sitting on a nappy, and it was just really uncomfortable for me sitting all day. So yeah, tampons work the best for me. I haven't tried menstrual cup, as I mentioned before, because I don't feel comfortable using that with a personal assistant. And I believe that's it. Yeah.
I think you mentioned earlier that you do use NatraCare tampons. Is that right?
Yes, I do, Shani.
I
still have them beside me right here.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, so here's a box. So they're 100% cotton, totally chlorine free, and it's a plastic free applicator. So yeah, can't wait to try those. Imogen, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so at the moment, I almost exclusively use a menstrual cup. I think it's probably my favorite period product ever. But then I also have a wide selection of period pants from a range of people. Here we go. Here's one I prepared earlier. Lovely. In fact, I have got some from Cheeky Wipes. In fact, actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about Cheeky Wipes. Yeah. I would say that they are probably the most cost effective and crip friendly pants that I've tried. And I've shipped like Thinx pants from America, and I've had pants from all different kinds of brands. Some of them sent on PR and some of them that I've bought myself. But yeah, Cheeky Wipes, what I really like about them is that their insert on the inside goes all the way up to the back and all the way up to the front. And so I've got a catheter, and sometimes I leak out the front of my catheter, but also sometimes leak feces. So actually it's quite handy to have all things covered, all eventualities, which most other period pants don't do. So yeah, I use a mixture of period pants and my cup, and I think period pants are absolutely brilliant. 100%.
And do you sort of recommend having like a couple of pairs, right? Or
I don't use any pads for liners at all. I know that Cheeky Wipes suggest sometimes using liners, but so I would use my cup for my first heavy kind of 4 days, and then I just tend to go down to my pants, and then I just wear pants for like the remainder of the days. If I remember my periods coming, I might think to put on some period pants beforehand, but what's tricky about that is you have to have made the financial commitment to have enough pairs, like we're talking 10 pairs of pants now, aren't we? And that obviously can be quite expensive. But the Cheeky White pants, I was surprised how cost effective they were and how good they were at the job that they did. When I've paid, like, I think my Thinx pants were like nearly £40 a pair. Like, they are not cheap. But my cup, I bought one cup and I didn't like it, so I boil washed it and gave it to my mate, and she was like, well, do you want to try mine? So she boil washed hers and gave it to me, and never bought another one since. So like £20 on a cup, and I've had it years and years.
With period pants, do you change them as often as you would change a pad?
No, they hold way more than pads do, and they're like I hate having pads on me. They make me itchy. I hate the feeling of them on my labia. Like I hate pads. I hate the smell of them when you open them. Like I'm sure the Natural Care pads are probably better. I think I have tried some, but it was too long ago for me to recall off the top of my head. But I just don't like the feeling of them against my skin. But period pants do not feel like that at all. Like you don't feel wet in the way that you might do with a pad. And because it's like quite a nice kind of cottony feel against your labia, you don't get that horrible, like it feels like they're grating on you, but you don't get that with period pants at all. I would say if you're a really heavy bleeder, then you're going to need to change them more regularly. But I wear my period pants, so by day 4 or 5 I would wear my period pants for a full 24 hours and not change them.
Wow, okay, that's really useful. Thank you for sharing.
But I always buy the heavy bleeding pants, always, because then it doesn't,
you're covered then, aren't you? Literally.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you know what, I totally agree with you with pads. Like you're wet anyway from your period blood, and then you might be sweaty, and it's just not nice having that sort of plastic against you. You just mentioned Natural Care pads, and there's again, they're organic cotton, plastic free. So if you are interested, you can also try those as well. Oh, Robin, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add about that. One of the great things about period pants is that, and by the way, there's links to Cheeky Wipes and Wooker in the chat. One of the great things about them is that they are made up of basically 3 types of fabric, or 3 main layers. And the one that touches your skin is a wicking fabric. It's the same for cloth pads. And a wicking fabric, it's like with a sports jersey, that it sort of sucks your sweat away from your skin. So it takes the blood and the sweat into the core of the underwear or the cloth pad, and that's so it doesn't feel wet until it's full. Or if you've got like lumps of womb, then that can, the lining, you might see that, but it does suck the moisture away from your skin.
Thank you, thank you. And you know, as you're just saying that, I remember being a kid and seeing the adverts for like pads, and do you remember it would always be a blue liquid? And I never knew until I learned about periods what that was. And even now, that just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why that just popped into my head, but thank you, Robin. That was really, really good information to know. And do you have any sort of preferred products or products that actually didn't agree with you or you just didn't like?
Yeah, and so it's interesting that lots of people, when they talk about menstrual cups, they talk about Moon cups. But actually, Moon Cup is a brand of menstrual cup, and Moon Cup USA is slightly different to the UK Moon Cup, is my understanding. And the people that make the US Moon Cup also make a Keeper Cup. So most menstrual cups are made out of silicone, but the Keeper Cup is made out of latex if you're allergic to silicone. And there's also Maluna, which is a German brand, and they make cups out of TPE, which is what baby bottle teats are made out of. It doesn't last as long, so those menstrual cups last for 5 years rather than 10. However, they are softer. So if you've got you know, maybe if your cervix is in a slightly different place, or it's a low cervix, or you're new to them, having a softer menstrual cup might be a good option. And also for those of you that are trying menstrual cups, you can cut the stem off at the bottom. And just to reassure people that you won't get a menstrual cup stuck in your vagina, because if you can squat, your vagina is a tube of muscle and it sort of contracts onto itself, and so you don't need to worry about that. Like, there's nowhere for it to go, right? So so I mean, I've used period underwear like Wooker, and also menstrual cups like Lynette, but I've tried a lot of them. And I put in the chat a link to there's a lovely lady called Bryony Farmer who runs this well, she makes her own pads, but she also has a YouTube channel called Precious Style Vlogs, and she talks a lot. She's done lots of reviews. She's somebody who has, I think she has endometritis, which suddenly I can't pronounce, but I think you probably know what I mean. She kind of she started off with one menstrual cup and found it didn't work for her. She was kind of curious about it, so she started buying menstrual cups and trying them out and reviewing them, and now she's kind of like an expert on it. And so that she's made some videos, and I've put a link in the YouTube.
Brilliant.
In the chat.
Thank you. And Sophie, do you have any favorite products or things that you've tried and just didn't get on with?
Yeah, I'm actually learning loads doing this, Imogen. That's really, well, both of you actually, just about how much that period pads can hold. I think I underestimated that. I thought they would kind of like pads, and you have to kind of wear them for half a day or whatever. So that's really good to know. I have some cheeky wipes ones as well, which I definitely rate. But yeah, like I said, like big fan of the cup. I think, you know, I before my injury, I would use tampons completely. And then in the last few years, you know, there's obviously been a lot more conversations around things like cups and stuff like that. But for some reason, I just thought, because of having a spinal cord injury, being a wheelchair user, I just didn't kind of want to investigate. I didn't think it was for me. I thought it would be too difficult or something like that. And then I got sort of sent a few different products for PR, and I kind of eventually tried it out, and it was just like, boom, you know, they're just for me, and I understand it, it's kind of it's not for everyone, of course, and you know, particularly with things like dexterity. I my level of injury is low enough that I'm not affected in that way, but it's if you are able to use it, it's definitely worth giving it a go, I think, just because I mean, you buy it once and then it lasts 10 years, so you know, it is a bit of an investment. It costs 20 quid or so, which, you know, feels like quite a lot for spending on your period, but just, you know, that having to go and buy tampons like constantly. I remember like during lockdown having to ask my boyfriend to go and buy like tampons for me, and he would, you know, so old fashioned, it shouldn't be, you know, that conversation, but I wouldn't mind. I kind of enjoyed having to put him through that, but it is such a faff, and particularly with a disability, like having to go you know, to the shops every time to go and get more of them. It's
Yeah.
a real pain. So like cups totally take that away,
Wow.
save money. And also it holds a whole lot more than a tampon does.
Yeah.
And it's better for you, I think, as well. Like, so the whole thing about like the risk of toxic shock syndrome and all
Yeah.
that. And obviously the environment. So yeah, like no brainer for me.
Oh, so much
Yeah.
love here for menstrual cups. I've actually never tried one, but I am, and I just wanted to talk about reusable pads as well, because I had never come across one before, and I just can't wait to use it. So it actually clips together at the back, so it stays in place, almost like pads with wings. And you know, they also come in different sizes. So honestly, I've learned so much from today. Do you want to come in, Imogen?
I was just going to say about the pads. So I got a load of the pads from Cheeky Wipes as well.
Yeah.
They just weren't for me. I much
Mm.
preferred the pants, but I
Yeah.
gave them all to my best friend, and she absolutely loves them. So she doesn't actually do the washing in her house. Somebody else does it. So what she does with them is she rolls them up
Yeah.
and then pops them together, like with the poppers. So
Yeah.
she's made a ball with it,
Yeah.
and then she throws them straight in the washing basket, and then the person who does the washing doesn't unbutton them. They go straight in the washing machine.
Yeah.
And when they come out of the washing machine, she unpops them and like lays them out flat, and they're completely clean. Like it is, they're so easy to wash, so easy to care for. And they are significantly more comfortable than traditional pads, but also if you bleed heavily or bleed really, really regularly,
Mm.
it's so much more cost effective.
Mm.
And Cheeky Wipes do them in a various like range of sizes.
Yeah.
So you can get them for your heavier days or wearing overnight, or you can have like almost like liners for really, really light days.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, because you know there might be some people that think you have to do a separate wash for them, and then that suddenly becomes not very sustainable, and could cost more. But thank you. Kayla, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I had a little bit of an anecdote. It's been great to hear everyone's thoughts on the period pants as well, because my partner, she has a very heavy flow, and as a gift, as a romantic gesture, I gave her some period pants.
Yeah.
And she's very pragmatic. She's a very, very pragmatic woman. And the other day I saw her kind of walking around in the pants and noticed the familiar wings of pads underneath them, and I said, you know, you don't have to. The point of this is that you don't wear the pad. You don't have to wear the pad. I got the kind of extra super absorbent ones, and it's fine. And she turns to me and she says, "I'm not a risk taker."
Oh.
But it's great to hear that she can take the risk now, Imogen.
Yeah.
I'll reassure her.
Oh, and I guess it all sort of comes with you know, practice and confidence, and you know, I remember when I was younger and I first started wearing pads, I was just thought everyone could see when I'd leaked, and I was like, oh, you just check my trousers. Like now I don't even care. Not that ever did happen to me, but it just comes with confidence, I guess, doesn't it? But thank you all so much for sharing. I'm going to just come to the Q&A now, and there's lots of lovely comments in the chat, so do read those. Robin, did you want to come in there?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add about about using cloth pads, that if you're out and about, you can get a wet bag. And so this is just a bag that has 2 pockets within it, and one of the pockets is for used pads and the other is for your clean pads, and when you get home you just empty it into the washing basket. They're out there. It's called a wet bag. You can buy them on Etsy. You could also make them yourself, but just that might be helpful to people.
Thank you for sharing that. That's another handy tip. Thank you so much. So let's go to the Q&A. So the first question is, I've been using a Moon cup for about the past 15 years. However, I end up using a pad as well because it leaks. So Kyla, I guess coming back to your point, I have I have washable period pants, but on my heavier days, I don't feel clean. Do you have any suggestions? So does anyone have any suggestions? Yeah, Imogen?
There are like literally a billion different cups. Like go online, read the reviews. Like even Cosmopolitan will do an article on like the top 10 moon cups, or like I'm using the brand name Moon Cup, but menstrual cups. That like there are so many now, and some of them are for tilted cervixes, some of them are for people with really deep cervix. They have like different hooks on the end to get them out. Some of them are different shapes. Some of them are like once you've got it in, they're like self-emptying. There's a way to empty it. Like there are so many. Like just buying one from Boots probably just isn't the way forward for a lot of people. Like it's fine if you want to just try one out and you happen to be like of average, brilliant, congratulations. But most people aren't. The best thing to do is read online, watch reviews, look at what other people are saying, have a feel of your own anatomy, and then go out and buy some more. But also, like if you do buy some and they don't work for you, don't be frightened to ask your mates if they want them, or if you want to swap between you, like
Yeah.
bit of Milton in some boiling water will do the job, you know. Also I was going to say about period pants. There is a brand now, and I'm really sorry I cannot remember the name of them. I don't know if Robin might know them, but they have period pants that unclip at the side. So they've got like bra fastenings on the side of the pants. So that if you're like hoisted or rolling for transfers, then you can undo them completely so that they're flat, and then pop them on and do them up, and they undo at both sides.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I really agree with that point, because some people don't try, different products because of the cost. So, Imogen, thank you for sharing that. Just don't be afraid of that. Ask your mates, and they'll really clean it. And honestly, after this discussion today, like pads and tampons just feel really old school now. There's so many other amazing products to try. Sticking with menstrual cups, the next question is, how do you know which size of cup to choose? Robin, you've got your hand up. Do you want to go?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say that I think you're talking about, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I think it might be pronounced Flux Indies, the one with the Flux Undies, the one with the clip on the side. I'll put a link in the chat. And also my website, part of my book, I created a table of menstrual cups. It's not exhaustive, but it might be it might be helpful. I've totally forgotten what the question was, but there you go.
The next question.
It was about the size of menstrual cups. I'm happy to jump in. Are you going to take it?
Yes. So most menstrual cup brands, they call them different things, but essentially they often have sometimes a preteen one. Sometimes a few brands do that. Sometimes they also have like one that's for people that haven't had children, which tends to be a bit smaller, and then one for people that have had children, but it depends on the manufacturer. And that's, so you need to, I think, look at the manufacturer's website. Don't just buy cheap knockoffs off Amazon. Like do some research around it. Yeah. I think also just bear in mind that different cups, the silicone or the TPE can be different. Like the moon cups are very sort of rigid, and some are softer. So again, that's just a consideration.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in on that one?
I think I would just say, like, I'm queer and have never had lots of penetrative sex. I think that maybe makes a little bit of a difference. Yeah. But also, like, with an impairment, I think you need to consider like muscle wasting and like a lot of them, I don't know whether that was your experience, Robin, was like this whole, oh, you've had children, you haven't had children. Some of them say 35 and under and 35 and over as well. I think similar implication there, that you would have maybe either had children or had lots of penetrative sex. I think if you haven't had either, then it's potentially worth trying a smaller one before you try a bigger one. I am over 35, but one of the, I think it was an actual moon cup actually that one of my friends let me try, and it was really, really firm. I couldn't get on with it. It was too big for me. I couldn't cope. So I definitely still use a under 35 cup or a pre-pregnancy cup. So I guess like have a feel of your anatomy, and you know, if you've got some muscle wasting or if you've got prolapses and stuff, then it might be worth, you know, asking somebody to try a bigger one or a smaller one. But I mean, I wouldn't be too frightened to ask my mates to try one before I plumped the money for it. So, and I think some of them actually do a kind of guarantee where if it isn't right for you, you can give it back, send it back to them. But again, like there are so many reviews online. I would definitely get online and see what other people's experiences are, because each cup is quite individual. Like mine has a really quite a thin rim at the top, and I really like that. It makes it super flexible, easy to get in and out. But I know that the Moon cup is quite thick at the top and quite rigid. I really struggled with dexterity to get on with that. So there's a lot of considerations. I definitely read the reviews.
Yeah, wow, this is such insightful information. Thank you all so much for sharing so openly and candidly. The next question is, do the poppers on reusable pads cause pressure issues for wheelchair users or people that are perhaps seated for long periods of time? So I'm just going to hold it up. Does anyone have anything to add on this question?
I would say like I wouldn't be using them if I was sitting full time. That's
Right.
a firm no from me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would agree with that as someone who sits most of the day.
Yeah. And is that because of the poppers or just because it's a pad, or?
It's because of the poppers, but also like if you've got reduced sensation and you can't tell whether that popper's digging into your labia, then you'd have absolutely no idea. You could have a grade 4 pressure sore by the time you got home. Like
Sure.
if you've got any kind of reduced sensation, I absolutely wouldn't be using them at all.
Right.
If you haven't got reduced sensation but you are sitting for long periods, like lots of wheelchair users are in and out of their wheelchair during the day, and if you're moving around a lot, it's more about like something sitting in one place for a long period of time. So if you're sitting constantly and you're hoisted out, you know, hoisted in the morning and out at night, then I absolutely wouldn't be doing it. But if you are in and out of your chair regularly, or you're able to tell when it's hurting or move yourself independently, then maybe try it. But I think you would need to be like properly on it in terms of checking, like maybe even hourly for the first few times that you were using them, because you could do yourself some serious damage.
I'd also say, in addition to the pressure sores, something that I'd be worried about I have full sensation, but something I would be worried about is autonomic dysreflexia. That is also another potential harmful and life-threatening side effect of having skin or labia stuck in the pads.
Thank you.
Although I guess AD could, I mean, like any period products other than period pants maybe would probably potentially cause AD. So I guess if you're like anything poking in the wrong place could cause AD. So just look alive, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that you can get menstrual cloths that so if you were a wheelchair user, obviously I'm not a wheelchair user, but so I don't know how helpful this would be, but if you had someone in the morning could do the popper for you, so you knew it was safe and it wasn't gonna hurt you, you can get cloth pads that have inserts. So this is just a cloth pad and it's got like a little, I don't know what you'd call that. Yes, like a little flap.
Can you put a pad in the?
And you can put a pad in there, or you can put it comes with inserts, so you can slide them in. So when it gets full, then you can just put it into your wet bag, or you could use it with a pad, which might be good if you've got people who don't have periods supporting you and they don't know about like getting your knickers in the right place to get the pad in the right place. Having this, because it's kind of can only really go one way, so doing that might be helpful for some people.
Yeah, wow, just so many options, aren't there? So many different options. Imogen, do you want to come back in?
My final point on that would be, if you went on Etsy and you were buying the kind of pads that like local makers were just making, you might be able to persuade somebody to make something with like a Velcro or like a different, or just remove like the fastening. Because I mean, essentially, if you're sat all day, once you're on it, you're on it. It's
Yeah.
not going to wriggle out of the way. The reason that people need poppers is because as you're walking, you're kind of potentially moving the pad around. Whereas if you're sat all day, then actually maybe that isn't so much of a consideration. Obviously, Velcro could equally cause pressure sores or AD, but it's maybe slightly safer than the physical kind of popper. But it might be worth contacting, if that's what you wanted to use, it might be worth contacting people on Etsy to see what kind of alternatives they could offer you, or whether they could just not put the poppers on at all.
That's such a great suggestion. That's a really good call out. Thank you. So we've got a couple of minutes. I think we'll go to one more question. What do you wish that your parents or school, when you had period education, had told you about periods when you were younger? Anyone feel free to comment on this? I'm sure we've all probably got an answer. So the question is, what do you wish that your parents or school had told you about periods when you were younger?
I think that I wish that there had been less shame around periods, and that being encouraged, as well as it potentially being included as a source of bullying as well. Not that happened to me personally, but I could see how that would happen. I think as well, I was kind of taught in the late 90s, early 2000s, and we weren't talking about people of all genders. And I think that it would be great to have more gender inclusive education.
Absolutely. Imogen?
I think like I grew up feeling like, as a disabled person, my body didn't, or was like different, or like specifically gross in a way that other people's bodies weren't. And that turns out to be absolute bullshit. Like all bodies do really weird shit. Do you know what I mean? Like they leak and they smell funny and they look weird and they're bumpy or whatever. Like I wish that there had been a lot less like this perpetuated idea that there's like a perfection, like that some bodies do and other bodies don't, and that's absolutely rubbish. Like all bodies don't sometimes. So I wish that the shame around bodies in general was less, and I wish that it didn't take radical politics in order to kind of broach that subject, really. Like periods are just messy, but bodies inherently are also kind of messy and weird. Like why aren't we having more conversations about that in general also, you know?
Thank you. Sophie or Robin, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just echo, what Imogen has said and what Kyla has said. I think that it would be nice to have had more representation of different genders, and also to just know that nobody is perfect, because as having like cerebral palsy and autism, I just presumed if you didn't have those labels and you didn't have any other labels, you must be perfect, and that's obviously not true. And there's all, the human body is I guess you'd say fallible. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong, and some of those things are temporary and some of those things are kind of longer lasting. I think certainly in the UK that maybe things have got a bit better. People are maybe more aware now. It's people are more open to it. But it's, to me, it just also, there was no like disability representation, and I think that I also, sort of going back to what we were talking about earlier on, I think it would have been really great if boys, or like people that identify as a boy, or somebody without a womb, vagina, fallopian tubes and ovaries, would learn about periods as well, because like in my
Yeah.
book I've got like a series of pictures of people that don't have periods, to tell kids that, well, these people, you can still talk to them, like you don't have to feel embarrassed. There's nothing there's no need to feel embarrassed, because it's just part of, it's just part of your body, and this is just a thing it does. And in a way, human beings are really amazing, and so this is just part of being a human, and you should feel glad to be a human right now, because we can talk about these things, whereas maybe, say in 1910 or something, we wouldn't have been able to talk about it.
So true. Yeah, I completely agree there, Robin. And there's just a comment in the chat. This conversation is absolutely liberating. Thank you all for your time and genius. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. Sophie, did you have anything to add?
Just really to kind of echo what you guys were saying about shame particularly, and absolutely agree with you, Robin, about people that identify as men or boys, like opening up that conversation, as women. I know I've spent far too long kind of hiding that, and particularly with things like PMT or something like that, if I'm in a right rage before my period or whatever, and I really have a go at someone, I feel for a long time I felt like I wasn't able to explain why I was feeling like there was so much shame around that. And it's, it should be really something that is kind of celebrated and embraced and really talked about. We have a long way to go, I think, but it's been really nice kind of hearing everyone's thoughts about it today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, the one thing that I wish I was taught from a young age is that period pain isn't actually something that people should have. Like, I didn't know that until recently. Yes, like cramping and stuff that might happen, and that's okay considering what's happening in your body. But period pain is actually considered something that's not supposed to happen. And because I didn't know that, it took about 6 years for me to realize that I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, and then that took a few more years to try and get that under control. It's just the small things that I wish I was taught, that actually throughout your menstrual cycle you might have discharge, there might be some funny smells, you might feel differently, your different body parts might feel different. In the week of your period, you might want to eat everything that's in the whole house, just little things like that. And that might just be different as you go get older, or are in a different part of your life. So but that's all we have time for today. I can't believe how quickly the time has gone, and I have absolutely loved this conversation. I have learned so much just from you all, and I just want to thank each and every panelist for joining us today, being really open and honest, sharing your personal experiences and your expertise. Please go and follow them all on social, and go look at their amazing work, and Robin's book. Thank you all so much. Thank you everyone today for joining, and a massive shout out to our sponsors, Naturacare. Like, this is the first event where I truly feel like I'm being represented as a disabled person who has periods. So thank you to Naturacare and City to See for making this a possibility. And I'm sure that this isn't going to be the last conversation. So do go and follow City to See, because they've also launched a new guide today as well. And as Jazz said, they'll be sharing that along with the event recording in due course. But all that remains for me to say is a big thank you to everybody, and I hope you've all learned some new stuff today too.
Can I just say thank you to Shani as well? You've been such an excellent host. You've done a really great job.